Imagine building an asset that earns you money every single month, year after year, decade after decade. Now imagine selling it. You receive a large amount of cash up front. It might feel like you've won, but many wealthy families would never make that trade. In fact, some of the richest families in the world have held the same assets for generations, not because they're emotionally attached, but because they understand something most people don't. The best assets become more valuable the longer you own them. Think about it. Imagine owning an apartment building that generates $50,000 every year in profit. If you sell it, you get one large paycheck, but you also give up every future paycheck that building would have produced over the next 20 years. That decision could cost you hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars in future income. The wealthy think differently. They don't ask, how much can I sell this for? They ask, what will this asset produce over the next 30 years? That's a completely different mindset. It's the difference between thinking like a spender and thinking like an owner. The average person often buys assets with the goal of selling them later for a profit. The wealthy often buy assets with no intention of selling them at all. Why? Because cash flow is usually more valuable than a one-time payout. Imagine owning a business that earns $100,000 every year. Someone offers to buy it for $1 million. That sounds tempting, but ask yourself this. If that business continues earning $100,000 every year, why give up that income forever? Of course, there are situations where selling makes sense. But wealthy investors don't sell simply because an asset has increased in value. They compare what they're giving up. Future income, future appreciation, future opportunities. Sometimes keeping the asset creates far more wealth than selling it. This idea becomes even more powerful when you consider inflation. $1 today won't buy the same amount 20 years from now, but productive assets often increase their income over time. Rental properties can raise rents. Businesses can increase prices. Dividend-paying companies can grow their payouts. The income grows while the purchasing power of cash slowly declines. That's one reason wealthy families prefer owning productive assets instead of holding large piles of cash. There's another hidden advantage. Taxes. In many places, selling an appreciated asset can trigger capital gains taxes. Holding the asset allows it to continue growing without creating that taxable event. Tax laws vary by country and individual circumstances, but long-term ownership can sometimes be more tax efficient than frequent buying and selling. The wealthy understand this. They don't just think about returns. They think about what they keep after taxes. Another reason wealthy families rarely sell is leverage. Imagine owning a commercial property worth $5 million. Instead of selling it, they may borrow against part of its value. Now they have access to cash while still owning the asset. The property continues producing income. It may continue appreciating, and they haven't permanently given it up. This strategy carries risks and isn't suitable for everyone, but it demonstrates a larger principle. The wealthy often look for ways to keep great assets instead of replacing them with cash. There's another fascinating concept. Legacy. Many wealthy families don't think in terms of years. They think in generations. Imagine planting an orchard. The first few years produce almost nothing. Eventually, the trees begin producing fruit every season. Would you chop them down just because someone offered you money? Or would you continue harvesting fruit year after year? Great assets work the same way. They're financial trees. The longer they're cared for, the more valuable they often become. This mindset also changes how wealthy people evaluate purchases. Instead of buying something because it's impressive, they ask whether it creates future value. Will this generate income? Will this appreciate? Will it still benefit my family 20 years from now? Those questions naturally lead to better financial decisions. The average person often measures wealth by possessions. The wealthy measure wealth by ownership. Ownership creates options. Ownership creates income. Ownership creates freedom. Another mistake people make is celebrating every profitable sale. Selling for a gain feels exciting, but sometimes the greatest wealth comes from simply refusing to sell. Imagine buying shares in an incredible company decades ago. Selling after doubling your money might feel smart. Holding for 30 years might have multiplied that investment many times over. Time often rewards patience. Of course, not every asset deserves to be held forever. Some businesses decline. Some industries disappear. Some investments lose their competitive advantage. The wealthy aren't attached to every asset. They're attached to great assets. Assets that continue creating value. Assets with durable demand. Assets capable of producing reliable cash flow. Those are the ones they fight to keep. The biggest lesson isn't that selling is always wrong. Sometimes selling is absolutely the right decision. The lesson is understanding what you're giving up. You're not just selling an asset. You're selling every future dollar that asset might have produced. That's a much bigger decision than most people realize. So the next time you hear someone brag about selling an investment for a huge profit, ask yourself one question. What would have happened if they had owned it for another 20 years? Because the richest families in the world didn't become wealthy by constantly selling their best assets. They became wealthy by owning exceptional assets, then letting time do the work. Sometimes, the smartest investment decision isn't buying, and it isn't selling. It's simply holding on while your assets continue building wealth for you, year after year, generation after generation.